Your help, we can continue to fight for freedom, reach new audiences, and bring important information to the public free of charge. This is not possible without your generosity. Join our quest for the truth and our freedom and donate today, telling it as it is. This is today's News Talk, The World Today.
Today, this is James O'Neill. China condemned the U.S. approval of a record $11.1 billion arms sale to Taiwan, calling it a dangerous act and a violation of Chinese sovereignty. The package, still awaiting Congress's approval, includes 82 HIMARS systems, 420 ATACMS missiles, loitering munitions, anti-armor weapons, howitzers, software, and spare parts across 8 deals. It marks the second major sale under President Trump after a $330 million package in November. Beijing urged Washington to honor the One China principle and halt arms transfers, warning it undermines peaceful reunification. Taiwan, self-ruled since 1949, continues expanding defense ties with the U.S. EU leaders met Thursday to debate a proposal to use frozen Russian assets as collateral for a massive loan to Ukraine, which Brussels says needs $160 billion to finance military and civil operations over the next 2 years. Kyiv could run out of funds by spring. The plan would loan Ukraine the principal of Russia's seized assets, assuming future Russian reparations would repay the EU. Belgium, where most Russian funds are held, opposes the idea, fearing retaliation. Hungary also rejects the measure, calling it an escalation toward direct conflict with Russia. The U.S. reportedly objects privately, believing the move undermines President Trump's peace efforts. Poland urged approval, arguing money today prevents blood tomorrow. Russia labeled the proposal piracy. Australian Tactical Police detained 7 men traveling in 2 cars near Sydney on Thursday amid the ongoing investigation into the Bondi Beach terror attack. Acting on intelligence suggesting a possible violent act, heavily armed officers stopped the vehicles, ordered the men to the ground, and handcuffed them. The cars bore Victorian license plates. Police later said no current link to the Bondi attack had been identified. AFP Commissioner Chrissy Baird announced more raids and search warrants ahead as authorities work with domestic and international partners to map the suspects' contacts. Officials emphasized there was no ongoing threat to the public. Estonia has accused Russia of a border violation after surveillance footage showed 3 Russian FSB border guards crossing briefly into Estonian territory via hovercraft on the Narva River. The agents reportedly disembarked on an Estonian spit of land, walked around, then returned to Russia. Estonia increased patrols and lodged diplomatic complaints, stating there was no immediate security threat. The incident follows a pattern of small but provocative Russian incursions into NATO states, viewed as potential tests of alliance vulnerabilities. Estonia, which built a reinforced frontier after the 2014 Ukraine war, frequently closes border crossings when Russian forces appear near the boundary. Italy's Supreme Court definitively acquitted Deputy Prime Minister Matteo Salvini of kidnapping and international law violations tied to his 2019 decision to block the NGO ship Open Arms from landing 147 illegal migrants in Lampedusa. Prosecutors had sought a 6-year prison sentence, but the Court of Cassation rejected their appeal, affirming Salvini's position that the ship, Spanish-flagged and operating in Maltese waters, was not Italy's responsibility. Salvini said the ruling proves defending borders is not a crime. Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni and other European populist leaders celebrated the verdict, while Open Arms call it a dangerous political decision. Kemi Badenoch criticized Labour's defence fund due to welfare priorities.
Isn't it? How on earth are we going to pay for this? There's going to be very difficult choices, aren't there?
It's a good question. There's only one way to do it, and that is to grow our economy, get people into work. Conservative Party is the party of work. We have a Labour government that's the party of welfare. All it cares about is benefits. We can't fund defence with lots of people on benefits. All the money that should be going into defence is going on paying people to stay at home when they should be working.
This has been James O'Neill for The World Today.
There is a problem with medicine, and we can explain what it is by looking back to the discovery of penicillin. Penicillin, it turns out, was not just an accidental finding. Alexander Fleming discovered that mold he found in a culture dish was killing bacteria. But it took over 10 years before a team at Oxford University were able to isolate the active ingredient. They produced small quantities for preclinical and clinical trials, helping prove the compound was safe and could beat infection. However, they couldn't produce it at scale. In 1941, Andrew Jackson Moyer of the US Department of Agriculture, the forerunner to the FDA, suggested changes to the manufacturing process, enabling mass production. It turns out medicines are not invented when someone discovers a new molecular entity. They are the product of key stakeholders working together collaboratively. Until medicine can be manufactured at scale, it may as well not exist. And in 2025, this is a problem. In the 1980s, pharmaceutical companies began outsourcing production. Suddenly the system was significantly less integrated. Someone with a new discovery today will find themselves disconnected from the rest of the development and manufacturing process. Companies that develop medicine are still happy to work with big established pharma companies, but the modern day Flemings are cut out of the system. The result is far fewer new medicines coming to market. We want to fix this by ensuring the pharma industry builds a more integrated supply chain. We also believe that doctors' expertise administering medicine should be included at the beginning of the process. We know that doctors on the front line have insights about how to repurpose medicine. Doctors should be able to report their findings so that the necessary testing can be completed and they can share their results worldwide. Learn more here and help us take medicines back to the future.
With your help, we can continue to fight for freedom, reach new audiences, and bring important information to the public free of charge. This is not possible without your generosity. Join our quest for the truth and our freedom and donate today, telling it as it is. This is today's News Talk, The World Today.
Makers are facing more travel.
When we're on the go, it's easy to go into our own world. Keep your mind on the road.
Our beautiful world is changing, withering, dying by the hands of those who don't value nature, even though we all depend on it for life itself. But there is hope. Together with caring friends, the Nature Conservancy can restore our lands, heal our waters, and save our wildlife with big solutions only nature can provide. But every day we lose more of the places we love, and we urgently need to save endangered lands, waters, and wild species. The actions we take today will determine the tomorrow we leave to our children and grandchildren. The water they drink, the air they breathe, the beauty they experience. To learn more about how you can help protect and conserve our beautiful world, visit nature.org today.
Asthma is a growing problem, especially among children. Asthma affects the quality of life for millions like me every single day. My name is Chris Draft, and I have asthma. And I've spent more than a decade in the NFL tackling asthma on and off the field. Join me in the EPA in helping people control their asthma. Asthma is a lung condition that can be controlled through medication and by avoiding things that can make it worse. 3 steps are the solution to controlling asthma. Step 1, talk to a doctor. Step 2, make a plan. And step 3, get rid of things that can make it worse. Asthma can be tackled. For more information on asthma, log on to epa.gov/asthma.
We're today's News Talk, The World Today.
And welcome to a Friday. Thank goodness for that. I love Fridays. Can't stand Mondays, by the way, or Tuesdays, Wednesdays and Thursdays, but love Fridays. And Christmas too, just around the corner. So welcome to the planet. Today we're looking at VicGrid and the Victorian Renewables Rollout. In December 2025, Victorian farmers continued their widespread protest against the VicGrid, which is Victorian Government's energy infrastructure agency, proposed transmission lines, blocking access to their farmland. Using tractors and gathering in the hundreds, farmers physically blocked VicGrid surveyors and officials from accessing their properties to defy the state government's aggressive rollout of renewable energy projects. Farmers are being ignored, that their land and livelihoods are at risk, and rural communities have been seriously divided by the government's actions. Farmers are standing firm against fines and increased police powers, and confrontations look to continue as VicGrid attempts to conduct surveys for supporting infrastructure. Today we talk to our guest about this terrible attack on farming and the Victorian Government attempts to bulldoze through their reckless renewables agenda. Our guests are Ross Johns, President of the Wimmera Mallee Environmental and Agricultural Protection Association, Ben Duxon from Glenmar Farm, and James Burke from Burke Farming. Thank you very much for joining us, gentlemen. Ross, last time we spoke, which would have been about probably 3 months ago, has it gotten much worse? Is the Victorian Government, which is supposed to represent its citizens, and it doesn't, are they still relentless in their pursuit of saving the planet at your cost, at the destruction of farming?
Well, the interesting thing about government is government should be governing for all of the people all of the time, and they've totally neglected agriculture and regional Australia. The Victorian Government in particular doesn't even consider anything outside of Melbourne, maybe Ballarat and Bendigo, but that's it. Rural and regional Australia produce a lot of export revenue. 66% of our revenue comes from mining and 14% from agriculture. 80% of Australia's export revenue comes from regional Australia, and regional Australia has been neglected.
What about harassment from the officials, the police acting? And I feel sorry for the police in many ways because they're just doing as they're told, but the police and VicGrid, are they harassing farmers?
Well, the country police, I think, are very aligned to country people. Mm-hmm. The only way that they're going to get some police to actually come out and do the dirty work is if they get a busload out of Melbourne and say, this is what you've got to do. I think that's pretty unlikely. I think the government is really a little bit lost here. They've never come across a bunch of ethical people who are prepared to stand up for what's right. The question in every country person's mind is, why is the government looking after corporates and multinationals over the interests of farmers and Australians? This just doesn't make any sense. There's some money at stake here. These multinationals are getting guaranteed returns on these investments at the expense of ordinary, and some of these are 5-6 generation farmers who have farmed the land, worked hard for Australia, grown food to benefit everyone here in Australia and some overseas markets. It just doesn't make any sense. The Spanish investors coming in to build the V&I West link is just ludicrous. Why are we guaranteeing the profits of global multinationals over the interests of Australians? And I'd love to know more about how the government can justify that in their own mind. It doesn't seem fair.
Ben Duxon, it's not fair, is it? What about the authorities? How have they harassed you?
No, the police, as Ross said, the police haven't been out at all. We've had other showdowns with them during the years. So we're 3 years into this fight, and we've had other showdowns where they say we've imprisoned them and tried to lock them in, but that's simply not true. The local police come along and say, righto, everyone just move on. So I think this round was all about pure harassment and taunting of us, wanting to make us out to be the bullies and the aggressors out of this, and then they could play the victim. Alistair Parker at VicGrid has certainly played that role, as there was 3 visits at each farm. After one visit, they started seeing the bad press they were getting, and then they called off the rest of the visits. So it's they're trying to turn it around as though they're the good guys, but we've always said it's a complete no, it's a complete stop to this project, and it's a complete restart of energy policy for the next 100 and 200 years.
James Burke from Burke Farming. Without food, we don't survive as a nation. Ensure that we can, rare earth minerals at this stage are pretty popular. They're in demand. People are paying a lot, but at what cost?
Oh, it's going to come at a massive cost to our farmers across Australia. It's definitely not right. This mining one, which I'm not fully up to speed with, but can definitely say from friends and family who are, it's quite significant what's going on. I'm affected by VNI West with 9 kilometres of the proposed project, but it's not just that. It's the mining, it's the transmission lines, it's the proposed projects that have been put in pristine farming land. It's quite tough, and as Ross and Ben have just alluded to, like, our fight is not with the police. I've got a son who's a policeman. We support the police. They do an amazing job. And as we know, I think the police would find it pretty tough to come and lock up people who are just trying to do what we need to do, and that's feed Australia and feed the world as we do. And that's what us farmers want to do, and we really enjoy doing it, and we want to stick at doing that. And that's why we're going to stand at the gate. We're not going to let this happen. When these proposed project or the infrastructure turns up to try and do it, it's not going to happen. We are going to stop this. It's not needed. It's not a project that's required in Australia. As Ross has said, as what Ben has said, it's overseas corporations coming in here with government backing. For what reason, we don't know. We want to stick at what we know and what we do, and that's grow food and fibre for Australians.
If we saw these monstrosities, these huge, I thought the windmills were bad enough, but the interconnector, it looks like something out of a science fiction horror film, doesn't it, Ross?
Oh, absolutely, and I think it's just been extremely poorly planned, and they're planning to go around a Ramsar wetland at Kerrang, and this is a globally significant wetland, and it just makes absolutely no sense. There's a lot of Indigenous cultural heritage through there. Government clearly hasn't thought about it properly. They've got to remove a 70-metre corridor through the red gums of the Murray River. This is environmental destruction at its absolutely unbelievable best. And, I allude to Murray Watt's changes to the environmental laws, and that's enabled some of this to occur. But is it right? I don't think so. And I think Australians are going to stand up and say the poor process, the poor planning, the environmental destruction is just not what we want in Australia.
It's interesting. If you look at what they're doing, even up in Queensland with the Great Dividing Range, which is the whole of Australia, but in particular, they're putting in 3,400 or 3,200 windmills, 260 metres tall, and they're doing it now. They're widening all this, the bulldozing the beautiful Australian landscape. Affects koalas, affects the native birds, the bats there, and all that sort of stuff. It just kills them. And this would be I'd like Ben to give me his thoughts. Then the federal government has NEPA, the National Environment Protection Authority, worked out with the Greens. Now, can you just tell me, Ben, if I'm been drinking Kool-Aid or something? I would have thought NEPA would have put a stop to what's happening on the Great Dividing Range, what's happening in your area, but I don't see any of that. Again, I think it's smoke and mirrors, but what's your thought on the Greens being part of the National Environment Protection Authority and saying that, supposedly looking after, for example, Victorian bush? They're not doing anything of the sort. But what's your thoughts of that? And please don't hold back.
No, 100%, Mike. I mean, they don't get out of the city, these Greens, and this is an environmental disaster waiting to happen. And only just recently, James been out at fires and that, but up in Queensland, national parks being destroyed, and then out here, prime agricultural country being destroyed as well, and they are nowhere to be seen. So this just reeks of multinationals. It reeks of institutional investors. It reeks of billionaires, ex-politicians just trying to make money out of these subsidisers that comes into this program. So we understand this. They are nowhere to be seen, the Greens, in any of this, and the destruction will be quite significant out there. Other than the environment, there'll be the fires that also come to it. Like Victoria, you're talking 70% of our agricultural land needs to be taken up with this rubbish. They need to build it over 5 times to make anywhere near workable. This is not financial. The Victorian Government do not have the money to be doing this. They do not know how to handle money for a start. This project has gone for a $3.8 million to a $11.4 billion project, and it hasn't even started. So there is huge questions of how they actually propose to do all this and for what. And we still burn all our coal, all our gas overseas. We'll happily ship it overseas, but then we have to have unreliable power and the most expensive power in the world. This is crazy. This has got to stop, and it will stop at our farm gates. We won't let them in, and they've just awoken something that's really big, because the support coming in from the 2 weeks that we had compulsory access, tried to get onto our land, the support is massive out there, and it'll only grow. And farmers have a lot of goodwill out there in the cities, so there'll be a lot of uprising from not only the farmers, but there'll be a lot of supporters behind us. So it's environmentally, it's socially, and it's financially irresponsible to try and do this. It's all for a few elites to try and put their snouts in the trough.
Could you just tell me your local watering hole or town nearby? I sort of know. What would that be? Which town?
We're at Manu. There's a hub down there at the cricket ground, and they're getting harder and harder to find local pubs and all that. So because of
on a Friday night, the boys would be fairly vocal, wouldn't they, about the government?
100%, yeah. No, and none of it makes any sense, Mike. This is the problem. No issue is making any sense for what they're doing at the moment. And I think Australia just really needs to stand up and let's break this down. Let's take it down little by little, and we'll play our role. We'll be out here and we'll accept any support that wants to come our way, because we know the police won't be able to touch us if we're standing 15, 20, 30 deep with 300, 400, 500 people or more. So we need the support to be able to hold it up. And honestly, it's about energy prices in Australia and reliability. This is a government-induced energy crisis. This does not have to do with the farmers. The farmers are not the ones holding up. We are saying this project isn't right for Australia. It's not right now. It never will be. And we have to stop and we have to start again. We've got some of the most great energy resources in Australia, and we actually send them off overseas. We've got fantastic infrastructure here at the moment. Professors Mountain and Bartlett have already put out papers that say upgrade your existing infrastructure and easement, and away you go. You've got a cheap, reliable electricity grid. This is just completely wrong. They've got it completely wrong. They need to start again, and they actually need to own up and say they actually have got it wrong and start looking after Australians and Australian businesses. Australian businesses going out of business like nothing, and all these businesses are being propped up by the government. This isn't a way to government. Just let free enterprise do its thing, and that's what they've got to put their nose into everything, and free enterprise is the way we can work our way out of this.
Very interesting. James, what about you? You mentioned there's, I think you said a 9-kilometre stretch of where this big infrastructure goes up. What will that do to your farm?
Look, it divides our farm. Our farm runs north-south, so it basically splits it in the middle. And just with yesterday, I attended a fire which started about 8 kilometres to the east of my farm. And if that fire had started under this, this power line, it would have been a funnel to Kerrang. The way the wind was blowing, the length of that fire yesterday, it grew to 16 kilometres. If the wind changed, we would have had a 16-kilometre fire front. So if you put a transmission line through there, which arcs to the ground, and yesterday I saw the fire jumping over a kilometre into paddocks, into bare paddocks at times, and moving on from there. It's a massive threat. It's huge. Putting people's lives at risk to go and fight this, it's absolutely ridiculous. The safety aspect has not even been looked at. It's like they just don't care about the people out here that have to work around it, work with it, and trying to get that understanding through to the city people to get it that it's not like living in a city. We're trying to work around these dangers. And I've got my sons who are sixth generation coming onto the farm working with me. We have enough dangers out here on our farms without adding to it. And the responsibility falls back on us. Insurance, we have to go to 50 million public liability. The 20 million public liability doesn't cover it. That's at our cost, at our expense. They say that they're going to, sort us out with money to cover us for what's going on. It's not money. It's not right, as Ben said before, as what Ross has said. It's got nothing to do with money. It's about what's right for 100, 200 years in front of us. And it's just ridiculous. I just don't understand, or I can't comprehend how people, who we're supposed to be supporting and listening to and hoping that they have, us under their wing, they just don't seem to. And it feels like, it's them against us at the moment. But I can guarantee you, farmers, and what I've seen from what Ben just explained before, with the amount of people that have been turning up and a lot of people who have been messaging us from around, it's going to be a tough task for them to come through us.
Yeah, it's a very scary. I'm from the land, and when we had a flat I was on an orchard. It was terrifying for me because I actually got sweaty and everything. But which is terrible. But we had this flat and holiday flat, and they would come down from Melbourne, up from Melbourne because I lived in Mildura, and they were amazed at what we could do. I mean, wow, you guys have got electricity and everything. Yeah, but it's the ignorance from city and including the Parliament or state government. The ignorance, no matter what state it is, whether it's Queensland, New South Wales, Victoria, South Aussie, and these, it's massive, isn't it, Ross? I mean, they don't understand what they're doing is not just on a little bit of dirt. Don't ever say dirt, but on a bit of dirt, we're going to put a monstrosity. But you got all the other dirt to let your cattle roam free or grow wheat or barley or whatever. It doesn't work that way. I mean, it's just nuts. Ross.
Well, agriculture is a commercial enterprise, and we export our products into a global market, but we've got a lot of variability. We've got rain, we've got commodity prices, we've got costs. All those things impact the viability of a farm. And now we've got the ultimate, which is a stupid government of agriculture. It doesn't consider the long-term interest of Australia. It is just completely wrong. When we think about rural Australia is very vulnerable to fires, and James had this fire up near him yesterday, 10,000 acres, burnt in a flash. Extremely volatile. After the bushfire in 2009, there was a bushfire royal commission in Victoria, and those Victoria should be cool burnt every year. And as far as I'm aware, it's much less than 1% has been cool burnt. What they're doing is, and we feel very much that this is the same process they've adopted with renewable energy.
Ross, you're pedaling not fast enough. What we might do is just...
And it's just not right for Australia.
You're sounding very much like Jaime out of Max Smart. So if we could just...
was I dropping out, was I?
Yes, you are. So what we might do, I'll just go to Ben. Ben, tell me about some of the fines that they propose to give you all. I mean, if you don't allow them to come onto your property, they could have a potentially reasonable force. Have they explained to you what that means?
Yeah, so just a new law change this year, Mike. So what it looks like is I think it's about $800 for the first offence and not allowing them access, and then after that it becomes $12,000, and then if you're a corporation, it's $48,000. So they're big threats. They're going to have a lot of people there to lock us up. I'll have to have bus loads of them, but because what's happened here is the 2 weeks that we had it, and we put it out there and said, maybe the owner shouldn't be there for the day. No one listened to that. It was exactly the opposite, and everyone turned up, and the owners were at their gateway, loud and proud, and denying access to them. So it's actually got to the final hurdle, and the farmers themselves, that are intergenerational farmers, are saying enough's enough. We're here to stand up, and we certainly will. Fines aren't a deterrent to us. Jail time isn't a deterrent to us, because we know we've got the backing of the people.
Yeah, I totally agree. What about with you? And you, James, you mentioned your son is a member of the force. Good on him. What's the dilemma with and don't dob your son in, because we don't want him working in Minyip all his life, which is a nice place if you live in Minyip, but if you've driven through it, it's not so nice. But I'm just thinking though, what's the actual the feelings with the authorities in the area, because the bush is very close. Everybody knows everybody. And if push comes to shove, what do you think will happen?
Well, my son's in Queensland actually doing.
He's good.
So he's he lives in the sunny area of Noosa, so he's very fortunate up there. So, but yeah, look, talk to him plenty about this, and he's spoken lots of his colleagues. But just so you get it, like, we are friends with our local police here. They're community people. That they give to our community. My town of Donald, the local policeman comes and plays basketball in basketball sides with myself and my sons. So, we are a community out here. And as Ben has said, is they're going to have to bring in people from the cities, or policemen from the cities. And as you know, what are they doing? They're coming up to take on and lock up farmers, innocent farmers that are just trying to do what we do, and that's grow food and fibre. I'm not sure that they'd want to put their hand up to doing that. And if they do, look, I'll let a policeman handcuff me and take me away. But I think I'll have a different view if it's a VicGrid officer wanting to come and manhandle on myself. I'm sure that we're going to stand at the gate, be strong, be vocal, and we're not going to let it happen. The government can try, but I'm sure it's going to be pretty bad backhanded slap to them on how it's going to be dealt with and seen in the public.
What was the Ross? We're going to keep trying this because we do have issues. Actually, you're starting to freeze. What we might do, Ross, is if you could just disconnect, and we'll just go to a thing called a 3-up, so that Ross can reconnect and come back again. Ben, what was the response from the government from the December protest?
We did ask a lot of questions of what their next move is. Alistair Parker at VicGrid has come out into the media, and these were environmental studies they had to do. And he has said that, the environmental studies will be done anyway, and we'll just get that passed through, and you don't have to worry about it. Then he comes out saying that it's critical infrastructure, and we'll be able to talk the landowners through compulsory access safely and respectfully. Well, I'm telling you, Alistair Parker has no respect for any of the people out in the bush here at the moment, because he is leading this, and there is some really bad cases of him harassing people in our area, slandering people in our area, and actually, putting pressure on people to try and stand up. But mostly they go for the vulnerable people as well, and there's a really horrible case of them going after a vulnerable person 3 times in the 1 week and trying to get them to sign up. So this puts you back up, and it makes us really proud of our community in standing up and making sure that we don't let these bullies, and that's all they are. They're trying to facilitate something for the billionaires and the multinationals and the institutionalised investors and the ex-politicians out there as well. And it's a flawed process. This is flawed, and they will not get away with it. Alistair Parker will not not get away with this. If he wants to come out here, if Anthony Albanese wants to come out here, if Chris Bowen wants to come out here, Jacinda Allen and Lily D'Ambrosio, and tell us that we've got to give up our intergenerational farms, good luck. Because our people are angry, and they're really angry, and they're not going to put up with any of this.
I always think my dad always had a solution. I think he called it 12 gauge. But I don't know if we should be saying that, because with everything happening these days, especially that the Labor governments around the country want to stamp out everything, free speech, travel. Albanese's next one is he wants the people in the bush to drive at 80 kilometres an hour. How do you think that will go, James? Everyone sitting on 80 k's an hour. I don't think much.
Well, it just shows, and we want to talk about our state roads. They're absolutely ridiculous how bad they are. And look, the 80k thing's happened. It's been put up everywhere. We've had 80k signs put on some beautiful stretches, but it's just the roads that haven't been maintained, and that's how they fix it. Even potholes, reduce speed. And there's so many vehicles that don't see that reduced speed, and they're hitting this and damaging vehicles. It is a wonder there's not more lives lost with the condition of the roads around here. Seriously, we've been forgotten. We've been, well, not forgotten, deliberately forgotten and left alone out here. We need to keep whinging and fighting our case, and hopefully we get a change in the election and get someone in that actually wants to, work with us.
And I think you forget, James, that the reason why I'm appalled that you have not seen this, that the reason why you have those massive potholes resembling the Grand Canyon is because they want you to test the tractors out, make sure the old Massey Ferguson works, because you have them. Now, if they had those potholes in the city, which they do, by the way, cars would disappear forever. I mean, and it's interesting, isn't it? Well, we won't fix that up, but we'll make everyone drive slower. And it's like, give me a break, just go and do your job. That's why we pay taxes. Ross, good to see you back again, hopefully for the next 30 minutes. What will the government...
Let's hope so.
Yeah, well, fingers crossed. And although I did see a note from Jacinta Allen saying, we know where you are. But what will the government do now? What will the Victorian government do now? And just from the conversation from Ben and James, I'm not sure if they know what they're going to do now. No, he's done a high me on
I'll tell you what the Victorian government are going to do. The process is just so poor.
No, we're not working. So what I might do is just...
government is just so...
Yes, what we might do is just...
All right, see ya.
We'll try that one more time, but nice chatting with you. Otherwise, talk to you again later. Have a lovely weekend and a beer for me. Okay, that was going well. Technology is working well in the Wimmera. Ben, what will the government do now?
Well, they've got everything in their favour, Mike. So, whether they come out with a big stick and really try and take us on, I think it'd be political suicide in an election year coming up in Victoria. So, we need to lobby both sides of government as well, the Liberals and the Nationals as well, to make sure that our issues are known. And there's been talk that they think that if there's contracts signed that they'll have to go ahead with them, but we can assure that contracts here in Victoria mean nothing. Only have to look at the Commonwealth Games and the other roadways that have been out there as well. So what they do is up to them, but they have the money behind them. They have the taxpayer money. They have the rules and regulations, as we've seen with the property rules. They can come in and change that and take away our rights to appeal as well. They've done that in numerous occasions. But what they don't have is they don't have the passion of the people out here. They don't have the love we have for community and the absolutely morals and the values. Their morals and values are completely out of line with what we do out here. Alistair Parker's leading that, and we're not putting up with it. So we will certainly still be fighting whatever they throw at us. And it's about the people power and it's about the support we're getting as well. Like you'd be amazed how much support is actually coming for us. And farmers farmers, as I said before, farmers have got a really good reputation within the city. I think it's only these Labor people that think they can live without farmers at the moment. So good luck to them. We're seeing it all around the world that farmers are uprising, and they're not putting up with this. The farmers in London are into it, Belgium and that and the like. And we're certainly we'll do whatever's needed. Civil disobedience, if it comes to it, that's fine. So we've got a really committed group that will take it all the way, and we'll push back as hard as we can.
I see Jeremy Clarkson in the UK and other pubs, especially in the farming or rural areas, country areas, they're banning all the Labor politicians. Anybody that was with government is not welcome. And it's not such a bad idea because, forget them not being able to come in. It does send a message, doesn't it, James?
Well, that's happened here across Victoria. I've actually heard of a few bakeries that have put pictures of Jacinta Allen up and said, not allowed. So that's actually happening out in the country.
Is that in the pie, or is that just as a customer?
That's as a customer. They're not allowed. Not allowed in the shop. So when that sort of stuff's happening, the government's on the nose. It's actually happening, and it's happening right in front of us. You can see what's going on. It's not just the things that we've got going on. I can guarantee everyone in Victoria has got a problem with what she's doing at the moment. I don't know. I'd hate to be in her shoes.
Has the government at any stage tried to engage constructively and with respect with the farmers?
Never, not once. It's all a tick box exercise. That's it. They've never listened to it. This is 3 years we're in here, and not once. They lie directly to your face, or we say we don't know. The information that comes out of it is horrific. That they don't know actually about the whole project. We ask them what's going to happen next. Oh, that's for someone else to decide. So no, I think they've just pushed too hard. They haven't noticed what they've come up against. This V&I West line that we're proposed to have through our area was supposed to go through Jacinta Allen's Bendigo electorate. So it got pushed out to us, and they thought there's no people out there. Well, that'll be an easy kill, nice flat land. And they've come up with something a lot bigger than what they've expected, and it won't back down.
Yeah, what do you think, James? Have you, because obviously you've all the farmers in some way or another now have dealt with, or those in the land, not farmers, those in the land have dealt with the magnificent Jacinta Allen government in some way or another. Have they, with yourself, tried to sit down with you over a beer or a scone or whatever, or Lamington?
Well, no, that's never happened. I've had a couple of conversations with Alistair Parker, and he comes across all smooth and calm and talks real quiet, but he's absolutely lying. I've explained my concerns, and my concerns are the same as everybody's, and he blatantly lies and says, we'll just move it along to fence lines. We'll be able to get this to work through with you guys. It's a 70-metre easement that's already been drawn in. They can't move it to fence lines. That is an absolute lie. They lie all the way through. I have not had one honest conversation with any of them yet. Back at the beginning, wrote lots of things and tried to express our concerns out here. And I got an email back from TCV stating that James had a visual aspect with it. That wasn't my concern. I had nothing to do with the visual aspect. It is a concern to a point, but it's got nothing to do what we do with farming and how we will work around this absolute ordeal of a setup.
Yeah, it's pretty wild, isn't it? What about the tell me, Ben, about Across Victoria Alliance?
So a group of, I think it's probably up to the mid-30s, and it's just everyone that's fighting every project. There's been a power of work done by Andrew Wiedemann and his crew there, and it's about getting a sounding board for each other and then working on tactics of how we move forward, how we get ourselves out of this mess. Unfortunately, our National Farmers Federation and our Victorian Farmer Federation have been left sitting on the fence. So that had to happen, is getting the groups together and actually working together to get a result that we all, and this is all about the renewables, it's about the mining, and it's about the transmission line, it's the batteries and the like, and it's everything that the emergency services tack. It's probably everything that's coming to us, and it's amazing how much they'll keep throwing at us. And I think these things have been fantastic. fantastic, because we know that after this project there'll be something else that we'll have to fight, and we'll have to fight together. But the amount of people and the acquaintances as we've made out of this is been massive, and the amount of support's getting bigger and bigger. So farmers haven't probably been like that previously, and this is something that they've all said, this is our intergenerational farms. This is something that we don't want to lose. This is a really important thing to stop Australia going down. And energy is one of the biggest issues on the plate at the moment, and we need to make sure that we get it right for the next 100, 200 years. And we're saying they've got it wrong. We've done a lot of work on this. We've spent 3 years in it. We've got some really clever people in our group that have unpacked it and said, and no, this is no good for it. There's other people that are out there fighting and saying it's no good. So the government's really coming up against it at the moment, and it's all about just the subsidies. It's about making people money and corruption and all that. It's certainly not about an energy policy for our future.
While we're here, Ben, I just want to know how you think you would go getting them to change their minds, because if you look at Labor governments, both sides of politics are disgraceful. They're they're all basing the progress on a lie about climate change. We need to look after the environment, which farmers do magnificently. If you don't look after the environment, then you'll go broke. So we do look after the environment in the bush. But to change a government's direction with so much already invested, and a lot invested from overseas, and with their and if you look at Victorian Government, for example, like all Labor governments, they don't consult. I mean, if you look at the treaties and stuff like that, if I recall correctly, Australia said no to a lot of the things, and they're saying we don't care. So if they have that attitude that public consultation and caring for citizens is not number one, how do you think you would change their mind about these unreliables, as Senator Malcolm Roberts would call them?
I honestly think they're digging their own grave in this. There's enough information coming out that this can't possibly work there now. So, as I said earlier, we'll just play our role. We'll just be a small player in this. But at the end of the day, it'll be at the gate, and it'll be us standing there and getting the support out there as well, and making sure everyone's educated about it. Like our issue certainly isn't with the city people. The city people are fantastic for us, and understand that what farmers do is a really important thing in their life. So this is about the governments, the Labor governments at the moment, really trying to steamroll. And I think we're used to being told what to do, and I don't think we've had the courage to stand up. Well, we certainly have now got the courage to stand up and make our voices heard, and make sure that our communities are really backed. And that's what it's all about, is when you get out here and live out in the regions, it's all about the communities and how you support each other. And this has really come to the fore right now, because they're trying to compulsory access or compulsory acquire our land over an energy policy that will fail to work. They have to build this over 5 times. They have to take up a huge amount of easements, so they just can't possibly do it. So we'll play our part. We'll certainly get as much information out there as possible. So that's about educating people on the energy policy moving forward, and making sure that they understand this is not a farm versus energy thing. As I said earlier, this is a self-induced government energy crisis, and they say the lights are going to go out and this is critical projects. Well, it's not, because we know we can update current infrastructure and easements and head down, burn more coal, and then get to the nuclear with zero emissions. So we need to plan these things. They've got it completely wrong, and we need to make sure that the rest of Australia is educated enough. And it hasn't been, until it really comes to you, until it really got skin in the game, it probably doesn't make any sense. But once you have, now it's about educating, because it's going to be everyone that's going to have skin in the game, because their energy prices are going to go through the roof and their reliability is going to go down. So we need to make sure that people are aware of all that.
Ross Johns, welcome back to Planet Earth.
Thank you.
And as you're sitting in your brand new Jaguar, obviously.
No, it's not a Jaguar.
Well,
no, it's a Land Cruiser.
No, they are, but you're in the bush, and you can I mean, according to city people, you're just raking it in. That's why.
Well, we don't rake in our telephone service anyway. So I had to move closer to the tower to get better service.
I just got a message from Jacinta Allen saying, "Ha ha, I got you." Just tell me.
She cut me off.
Yeah, she's great. She's a great person, not. And it looks after Bendigo. Let's put it through anywhere else but Bendigo. I just wanted to focus on at the moment on the government, how we can change the government's direction, because I always say that if government wants to do something, whether it makes sense or not, they're going to do it. And to change their direction or their mindset, it's much harder. Besides going through the motions, how else can you change a government's approach and its intention?
Well, we've got to change the thinking of government, I reckon, and so it's not just changing political parties. We've actually got to try and change the strategy and the thinking beyond that. We need a proper process, a coordinated, a thoughtful process from government, and so far we just haven't got anything like that. VicGrid has just had a poorly planned process, and it's just appalling what I see happening. The energy crisis that's been created in Australia. We're still exporting 1 million tonnes of coal to keep the energy prices cheap in China. This makes no sense. Why are Australians being penalised when we're still exporting so much coal and gas to keep the energy prices cheap in China? The taxpayers of Australia, the ordinary workers paying tax every week, supporting the production of renewable energy and global multinationals' profits, but also supporting the consumption of energy in Alcoa smelter in Portland, the lead smelter in Port Pirie in South Australia, the copper smelter in Mount Isa, the aluminium smelter in Newcastle. The taxpayers of Australia are on a hiding to absolutely nowhere, and very shortly there's going to be a taxpayer revolt saying we don't want to support these non-commercial industries. We've got to get lower power prices. We've got to make power prices the cheapest in the world in Australia, and we should have the cheapest energy prices, and the government can do it, but they're choosing to align themselves to these multinationals and corporates in a semi-corrupt, fully corrupt way, and we've got to fully investigate how those relationships are occurring.
Mm-hmm. James, just tell me about the fire issues. I mean, am I wrong in assuming that you are a bit of a firer yourself, so you understand the geography and what needs to be done? And how will this development affect the fire safety in particular, your area?
Well, just on yesterday, and yes, I was driving our district truck, which is Jeffcott. The power lines, when we had aerial support there, we had 8 planes and 2 helicopters giving support. They couldn't do anything around any of the power poles. The trucks that were working around it, you're out in the middle of a stubble paddock and there's a power line crossing it. At times, we're engulfed in this. And if we can explain it to any road user, that when you get fogged in, you get that fog that's that heavy, and any city person, anybody would have been in that scenario at some point. This is like 4 or 5 times thicker than the thickest fog you'd see. You just can't move because you just don't know what's in front of you. So having this live infrastructure out in our paddocks, and we're supposed to be trying to stop it, and they're saying, you're not allowed within 100 metres of it. I can guarantee you do 2 circles in a paddock and you're lost. You don't know where the corner of the paddock is, don't even know the direction you've come from. You'll end up underneath this, and with these high-power hoses we have on our trucks, if they were to squirt in the air, that would be an absolute catastrophic thing. They would be dead, the whole lot in that area. So the risk is put on us. So if we can't go near it, and as they say, it's no concern, they keep saying that, how do we get to the other side of the fire when there's this massive infrastructure there and the fire's burning under or along it? How do we stop it? And then, like yesterday, if the wind changed yesterday, 16-kilometre fire front, and if the wind went to the south, it would have taken my town to the east of me, Charlton, it would have taken it completely out. We were lucky the wind didn't change and the fire front was only 2 to 3 kilometres wide, and with 64 trucks turning out and probably at least 100 private units there. We got this fire under control in 5 hours. But to work around a high voltage power line, and as we know, with smoke and everything, it will arc to the ground and it will just stretch that fire out further. And all that is put on us volunteers. We're all volunteers to our local brigades. As yesterday, just quick sums, 500 people there fighting that fire. I would say there'd be 450 of them were volunteers. It's an amazing effort to see what we can do in the country, but then to be this sort of infrastructure put on us and we have to mind it, look after it at our cost again. People stopping doing what they were doing, their livelihood, earning money, doing what they're doing, to go and help out a neighbour or a friend is just, it's, you know, we just do it. We look after our area, we look after our local farmers, our local towns, because it is a community, as Ben has said, it's a community that we need to keep supporting and we want to keep supporting. And all they're doing with this is dividing and trying to beat us. And look, to be honest, the way it's going, I can't see it's going to happen. As Ben said before too, the weight of numbers is going our way.
Mm. And it's interesting too, the up in Queensland where your son is, and you must put in a kind word if he does book me for speeding or something one day, to say, I know your dad. Actually, I did that once. I was told by my father as a copper not to mention his name, and I did. And he was right, didn't do me much good at all. But anyway, but it's interesting, those the wind turbines. I mean, where your son is, up north of where he is in Noosa, it's if there's a fire, they can't allow planes, to aerial bomb the terrain because the wind towers or the wind turbines are just far too tall. And Ross, that again would create all sorts of problems for the communities because, as James said, how do you put out the fire?
Oh no, it's a significant issue, and most fires have been put out in the Wimmera or north of the Great Dividing Range in this semi-arid environment using air power and strength. So anything that restricts that is certainly going to endanger the community. But already we've seen where government is not concerned about rural communities; they're just saying we're coming through. I think there's nowhere near been enough proper process and planning. There's a wind farm just west of Warrnambool called the Warrnambool Energy Park, which is not a park at all. It's a bloody industrialised wind development. But underneath that, there's some miners called World Mineral Resources who have a tenement, and they've got one of the highest concentrations of rutile. And they're claiming that they've got an existing contract and that West Wind hasn't engaged with them properly, that they aren't communicating with them properly, and that's exactly what's happening with neighbours and communities. These processes aren't being done properly. Government's put in place a very poor process, and there's no way that this should be accepted and shouldn't continue in this way. It's got to be a proper process adopted by government, and a proper process, thoughtful process, considering all the issues, has got to be the pathway forward. And if we do anything else, the community is going to pay the price. And Lotus Creek wind farm up there in Queensland is just an appalling example of poor process. Wrong project in the wrong location, destroying Australia's natural environment and beauty. It's just wrong on many levels, and this government's got to be accountable.
Ross, as my voice breaks, puberty part 2 there, can you just tell me if somebody, I mean, there's people all over the world watching this. This is a global show. If someone wants to find out more about how government is the main inhibitor to farmers in Australia, as with the UK, if they want to find out more about what you do, how do they do that? Ross? But going well with internet. Planet Earth, we're here.
Environment, agricultural protectionist.
Yeah, he's just dropped out again. That's going great.
I think Jacinta's onto him.
Yes, that's what she's there. She just sent me another text. I haven't forgotten you bastard. Something like that. Ben, if somebody wants to find out more about what's happening in the area, with what's happening with farmers in Victoria and Australia, How do they? Where would they go? How do they do?
Yeah, I think it's our socials. I'm not on actually social media, but our Facebook page, which is Wallaloo and Gree District Alliance, is one to follow. There's lots of people there, and we will be looking to launch a campaign into the new year as well. So keep an eye out on the socials. I think it's on Instagram as well. But yeah, certainly there has been a lot sort of gone through those issues and those platforms, and we'll continue to get out there as best we can.
I wish you guys all the best. Now, the big thing is you got probably 30 seconds each, maybe a bit less. Ben, what are you doing for Christmas? You're going to have some rack of lamb. I believe you have some rack of lamb running around the place at the moment.
100%, yeah. No, we'll take some time with the family and friends, and we get into about first gear between Christmas and New Year. Maybe go down to the cricket and watch a bit of that, but certainly get around our community and make sure we have a good time.
And what about you, James? Just quickly, what are you doing for Christmas? And just to let us city folk know.
Well, we're actually at my farm this year for Christmas. Got a lot of aunts, uncles, cousins coming. My brother's down at Southend at the moment, hopefully trying to catch some crayfish for us. Otherwise, we will be eating a leg of lamb or maybe a pork roast or something.
I thought you might have been with your son, getting a bit of a tan. I mean, you know, that's a pretty easy, cushy job at Noosa, isn't it?
I would have said exactly, but I've been up there. It is a beautiful spot, and we do enjoy going. So it's a good holiday destination for us.
Tell him he needs to get to the back of Burke or somewhere. Do what a real copper does. Gentlemen, and also to Ross, who popped in and out. He just disappeared. Jacinta Allen, one to her, and Ben Duxon and James Burke. Thank you very much for being part of the big issue. This is The World Today.
With your help, we can continue to fight for freedom, reach new audiences, and bring important information to the public free of charge. This is not possible without your generosity. Join our quest for the truth and our freedom and donate today, telling it as it is. This is today's News Talk, The World Today.
For The World Today, this is James O'Neill. China condemned the U.S. approval of a record $11.1 billion arms sale to Taiwan, calling it a dangerous act and a violation of Chinese sovereignty. The package, still awaiting Congress's approval, includes 82 HIMARS systems, 420 ATACMS missiles, loitering munitions, anti-armor weapons, howitzers, software, and spare parts across 8 deals. It marks the second major sale under President Trump after a $330 million package in November. Beijing urged Washington to honor the One China principle and halt arms transfers, warning it undermines peaceful reunification. Taiwan, self-ruled since 1949, continues expanding defense ties with the U.S. EU leaders met Thursday to debate a proposal to use frozen Russian assets as collateral for a massive loan to Ukraine, which Brussels says needs $160 billion to finance military and civil operations over the next 2 years. Kyiv could run out of funds by spring. The plan would loan Ukraine the principal of Russia's seized assets, assuming future Russian reparations would repay the EU. Belgium, where most Russian funds are held, opposes the idea, fearing retaliation. Hungary also rejects the measure, calling it an escalation toward direct conflict with Russia. The U.S. reportedly objects privately, believing the move undermines President Trump's peace efforts. Poland urged approval, arguing money today prevents blood tomorrow. Russia labeled the proposal piracy. Australian Tactical Police detained 7 men traveling in 2 cars near Sydney on Thursday amid the ongoing investigation into the Bondi Beach terror attack. Acting on intelligence suggesting a possible violent act, heavily armed officers stopped the vehicles, ordered the men to the ground, and handcuffed them. The cars bore Victorian license plates. Police later said no current link to the Bondi attack had been identified. AFP Commissioner Chrissy Baird announced more raids and search warrants ahead as authorities work with domestic and international partners to map the suspects' contacts. Officials emphasized there was no ongoing threat to the public. Estonia has accused Russia of a border violation after surveillance footage showed 3 Russian FSB border guards crossing briefly into Estonian territory via hovercraft on the Narva River. The agents reportedly disembarked on an Estonian spit of land, walked around, then returned to Russia. Estonia increased patrols and lodged diplomatic complaints, stating there was no immediate security threat. The incident follows a pattern of small but provocative Russian incursions into NATO states, viewed as potential tests of alliance vulnerabilities. Estonia, which built a reinforced frontier after the 2014 Ukraine war, frequently closes border crossings when Russian forces appear near the boundary. Italy's Supreme Court definitively acquitted Deputy Prime Minister Matteo Salvini of kidnapping and international law violations tied to his 2019 decision to block the NGO ship Open Arms from landing 147 illegal migrants in Lampedusa. Prosecutors had sought a 6-year prison sentence, but the Court of Cassation rejected their appeal, affirming Salvini's position that the ship, Spanish-flagged and operating in Maltese waters, was not Italy's responsibility. Salvini said the ruling proves defending borders is not a crime. Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni and other European populist leaders celebrated the verdict, while Open Arms called it a dangerous political decision. Kemi Badenoch criticized Labour's defence fund due to welfare priorities.
Isn't it? How on earth are we going to pay for this? There's going to be very difficult choices, aren't there?
It's a good question. There's only one way to do it, and that is to grow our economy, get people into work. Conservative Party is the party of work. We have a Labour government that's the party of welfare. All it cares about is benefits. We can't fund defence with lots of people on benefits. All the money that should be going into defence is going on paying people to stay at home when they should be working.
This has been James O'Neill for The World Today.
There is a problem with medicine, and we can explain what it is by looking back to the discovery of penicillin. Penicillin, it turns out, was not just an accidental finding. Alexander Fleming discovered that mold he found in a culture dish was killing bacteria. But it took over 10 years before a team at Oxford University were able to isolate the active ingredient. They produced small quantities for preclinical and clinical trials, helping prove the compound was safe and could beat infection. However, they couldn't produce it at scale. In 1941, Andrew Jackson Moyer of the US Department of Agriculture, the forerunner to the FDA, suggested changes to the manufacturing process, enabling mass production. It turns out medicines are not invented when someone discovers a new molecular entity. They are the product of key stakeholders working together collaboratively. Until medicine can be manufactured at scale, it may as well not exist. And in 2025, this is a problem. In the 1980s, pharmaceutical companies began outsourcing production. Suddenly the system was significantly less integrated. Someone with a new discovery today will find themselves disconnected from the rest of the development and manufacturing process. Companies that develop medicine are still happy to work with big established pharma companies, but the modern day Flemings are cut out of the system. The result is far fewer new medicines coming to market. We want to fix this by ensuring the pharma industry builds a more integrated supply chain. We also believe that doctors' expertise administering medicine should be included at the beginning of the process. We know that doctors on the front line have insights about how to repurpose medicine. Doctors should be able to report their findings so that the necessary testing can be completed and they can share their results worldwide. Learn more here and help us take medicines back to the future.
With your help, we can continue to fight for freedom, reach new audiences, and bring important information to the public free of charge. This is not possible without your generosity. Join our quest for the truth and our freedom and donate today, telling it as it is. This is today's News Talk, The World Today.
And welcome to the Protagonists on the World Today. It's Friday, hour 2. Our guest getting ready for Christmas. I see David Richards there. He's bought his own Santa outfit. We'll talk about that later. Terrible lies I'm spreading. We've spoken many times about the expensive inquiries in most of the Commonwealth countries following the inverted commas COVID-19 pandemic. Now, these inquiries have studiously avoided any explanation of what our governments were attempting to do, and how so many officials conspired to engage in such abhorrent, deviant, and many would say criminal behaviour. We do, of course, know the consequences of their terrible actions, but what motivated them? And how were they able to carry out their plans on such a devastating scale in so many countries? How did they do it? Was it led by a very small group of generals whose policies were carried out meticulously by obedient frontline troops? Quick walk over the edge, that's what happened. It's troubling to think about, but are our public health services the most obvious places to roll out population-wide medical experiments? Think about it. I think so. Our panel today will give us valuable insights into this question and how the regulatory agencies failed so spectacularly during the most critical time. Our panel they're pretty magnificent. And we'll get into those in just a second, because I want to know how influential, this is where they're very good at. Elizabeth Hart, for example, knows, she studies this. How influential is the UK pharmaceutical industrial complex? And was it the epicentre of the global COVID scam? Is this where the buck should ultimately stop? Hedley Rees thinks so. We spoke to Hedley about this just recently. Elizabeth Hart, one of our guests, is a vaccine researcher and commentator. Cheryl Granger is a training consultant for pharma industry. And Dr. David Richards is Professor of Medicine. Elizabeth, just in a nutshell, what went wrong? What was the hub or the epicenter of these terrible things that medical authorities did to the world?
Well, I'm really questioning, why was there a vaccine solution to something that was already acknowledged was just, really basically respiratory ailments that were common respiratory ailments. I mean, this was already acknowledged by the WHO in early 2020 that it was mild. So how did this get off the ground? How did we get a vaccine solution? And I've asked this question, what was the actual process for this? How was this evaluated? Where's the minutes of the meetings? Because it just seemed to just fly, that they already had this plan, disease X was already in the works. And I'm really looking at Neil Ferguson. Everybody knows Neil Ferguson, Imperial College London, and the famous Report 9 that was published on the 16th of March. And this really laid out what was going to happen. They were making comparisons with 1918, which I think there's a big question mark over that now. We need to go back and look at that. But, they were comparing this as if it was going to be a disaster, and saying that they had to suppress the virus until a vaccine becomes available. So everything was about this vaccine. It wasn't disclosed in Report 9 that Ferguson and his colleagues are funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, which is arguably the biggest vaccine promoter in the world. And unaccountably, Bill Gates is running vaccination policy, international policy. And he had Boris Johnson on a string. He was calling the shots, literally. So this is what we've got to look back on now, how this happened, because that Ferguson report, that modelling report, which had made all these dire predictions of deaths in the UK and in the US, it was used to influence Australia. And we were closed down for 2 years on the back of that modelling report, which I think was just completely made up. So we need to sheet this home back to Ferguson. That guy is still sitting there in Imperial College. He's got a history of making dire predictions with swine flu and foot and mouth and what have you. And I think that's fundamental to go back and look at him. And also people like Andrew Pollard. Also the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, which is a pretty big conflict of interest. So I think there's a lot of stuff to look back on now and to expose.
I totally agree with you. I think it's abhorrent. Cheryl Granger, you're involved in the training side of things with the pharma industry. the drug regulation and safety in the UK, what are the key agencies that are involved that that are going to protect us?
They're going to protect us. When are they going to start? Our regulatory body. In 2005, the government had a health committee that investigated and was very perturbed that 86% of its funding came from pharma and said that this had to stop. But of course, that's continued. I think in Australia, your TGA has even greater percentages that are sponsored by pharma. So there's too much control by pharma of the regulatory agencies that's in charge of doing our pharmacovigilance, which is our drug safety. And I've gone after the MHRA as much as I can to try and get them to admit to the problems that they're having. And I have got some details on that.
David Richards, you keep popping in and out, so obviously your internet is playing up. Hopefully there's no storm, and hopefully it doesn't curtail your Santa activities over the weekend. But we have a very bad internet because your lips are actually moving and there's nothing coming out of it. So what we might do is just go to a 2-up at the moment. If David, if you can reconnect, just reboot your computer and put a couple of 20-cent pieces in, maybe that'll work. Elizabeth, what are the safety regulators in Australia, or the key agencies, sorry, and just give us a brief overview on what they are, what they were meant to do, and how they failed abysmally.
Well, I suppose the TGA is the opera of the MHRA in the UK, and as Cheryl says, they're funded by industry. So we've got the foxes in charge of the chicken coop. And we can't rely on these organisations to really monitor safety. They're relying on manufacturers' data. So how can we trust these people? And it's so disturbing to think that the TGA can approve these products based on manufacturers' data, and eventually these products can be mandated for use, which is the shocking thing that happened in Australia, where these COVID vaccines were mandated, and people were losing their jobs or participating in society if they didn't submit to them. So there's so much the public doesn't know, that they probably think regulators are looking after their best interests. But I think regulators are trapping us, that by them approving a product, it's then got that potential to be mandated when it's approved by organisations like ATAGI and the Pharmaceutical Benefits Advisory Committee. And it's funded by government. The taxpayers are funding these products, or being put into debt to fund these products, and then they're actually being foisted on the population. We're being coerced to submit to them.
Cheryl, could you tell me how the funding and the setup works for these for the industry within the UK, and how they work with your government hand in hand?
Well, as I say, they get most of their funding from pharma. They are very keen to get things happen as fast as they can for pharma at the moment. So the MHRA wants everything out within 100 days, licensed and on the market and approved and what have you. And of course, they've been on record of now calling themselves, instead of our regulator, they call themselves the enabler, which is them admitting to the fact that they are enabling pharma to make all these vast profits because they're giving a big tick of approval. I mean, during the vaccines, the COVID vaccines being supposedly analysed by MHRA, they actually, well, according to the Pfizer document analysis that was released in the States from the FDA, there was about 451,000 documents they had to go through, and they did it in 2 to 3 months, along with each of the 3 main vaccines that they licensed. It's basically, they're working hand in hand. During the time that they analysed the COVID vaccines, they were down in staff by about 20% at the MHRA. they actually were working from home because we were in lockdown. And whenever I went after them for FOI, they quite often said that the computers kept crashing. It wasn't a very good way of going forward and protecting the public from risk by looking at safety. And the safety systems we've got don't work. The government have supposedly had a look at yellow card and other things that are done, but everything just continues in the same old way. So it's a very ineffective system. There was 4 ways of looking at drug safety that has been set up over the time, and really there was only yellow card they were looking at. That's why I went after them over their yellow card vaccine monitor, because that was a bit more accurate information. And what they concluded when eventually I forced them to make a report on that was that still safe and effective. The vaccines were safe and effective, but they came up with only 13.7%, that's 1 in 7 people, had a medically serious event. So we've got a drug regulator that's quite happy to say 1 in 7 is going to get a medically serious event. It's not working.
We've just lost David again. If Cam could get David into the box, we're actually having all sorts of trouble here. I need to have some pharmaceuticals, maybe myself. No, I'm just joking, just a scotch. Elizabeth, the capture by pharmaceutical, the industry itself, like any other, like other countries, for example, the government regulatory licenses are funded by industry, aren't they?
Yes, that's right. They're funding the TGA, so they're not going to be objective, are they? If they're if they're funded by pharma, and plus with the COVID vaccines, so I was obviously watching this very closely at the beginning. So when they put these vaccines out there, they didn't know if they prevented infection or transmission or not. They just put them out into the community. It's astounding what they did when you think that this COVID thing was not what it was made out to be. And yet they put these experimental products out into the community. And they were basically setting up the community as fodder, because Albert Bourla, the Pfizer CEO, he was admitting in April 21, you think about that, April 21, he was predicting that there would be annual revaccination. So he was putting that out there already in April 21. So meanwhile, people were being told they would be fully vaccinated after 2 doses. But in reality, they were being set up for a repeat vaccine market. That's what was going on. This means there is no valid informed consent for these products because people were told a tissue of life. And this is the scandal that's waiting to be exposed, that this was really about creating a vaccine market and also controlling people with digital ID that was going to be implemented by vaccine passports, which they were experimenting with. So this is the big picture that's going on. And as well as that, people supposedly then getting sick after these vaccines. This should have been reported as an adverse event, but they built up the story of, oh, here's a vaccine product that doesn't prevent infection or transmission. It's unbelievable that people went along with this. It's unbelievable that the medical profession went along with this, that they didn't have the critical thinking to call this out as the incredible scandal that it is.
And it is a scandal. We're just trying to get things worked out here because David keeps popping in and out. Cam's going to bring you in a second, David. I want to ask you some questions. Cheryl, can you just if you have any examples of conflicts of interest, fraud findings in recent years with key individuals, key agencies, and key companies?
There's too many to mention because they are...
Start off with a couple just to illuminate us.
The MHRA, every board meeting, which we've sat through many, many times, they're supposed to review the conflicts of interest, and very little is said. Nobody ever goes out of the meeting. They always stay there. They don't seem to have any conflicts of interest that affect a board meeting of the MHRA. But many of them are working with the WHO or they're working with pharma. They have this revolving door, which means that they go from MHRA to pharma and back again. They it's a closed shop. Once you're on that roundabout, you can't get off it. You keep going through the whole thing. There are so many conflicts of interest. The Committee on Human Medicines, that is headed by Per Mohammed, they have their committee meetings. They release them by mistake, and their conflicts of interest went to pages before you got into the minutes. There are so many that are paid for by a farmer.
David is now back with us, we hope. He's just done a good thing. He's a very good nurse. David, the industry needs reform. The whole medical industry, or it's a bit like anything. You need to put some new oil in it and crank it up, but it needs reform, and it needs a massive clean out, doesn't it?
Well, I don't think it's the industry. I mean, I think, a lot of the suppression came from government and from government agencies. I think that, there was, one of the things as a doctor, one of the things you want to understand is you want the data. You want the analysis of how these agents are working and so forth. And to a large extent, that was not released. And there were, whereas the patient level data, the raw data was available to pharmaceutical companies, there was no independent corroboration of this. And of course, I think that there's a lot of people in my profession who've done some extremely good work. I think of Peter Doshi and in Australia, Jayanthi Kundasanda, who has analysed the data. Even from the first Pfizer trials, which showed that in the Pfizer arm, in the active arm, there were more deaths than in the placebo arm. And so I think the thing is that it's a very strange situation where you have a supposed global pandemic, supposedly critical for medical intervention, and yet the one professional group that were excluded out of the dynamics of the whole thing with the medical professionals. And it seemed that the whole exercise was conducted by the military and by government agencies. And I think that, so I don't think you can necessarily blame the medical profession. I think we were all ready to, sort of get on board and offer our inputs. But of course, a lot of my colleagues, a lot of individuals were suspended for even just mentioning their even for the most innocuous comments, they faced medical sanctions. And so if you've got a medical profession, you've got one of the best medical professions in the world, and you refuse to let it speak, or you suppress what the scientists and the individual doctors want to, prepared to say, or indeed threaten them with their livelihoods, then, more fool you as a society, if you're allowing politicians and generals to make medical decisions. It's not a military exercise. These virus particles are as light as imaginable. They float up into the stratosphere and so forth, and you can't contain them like you contain an army. It's insane. So I think that we had our hands tied behind our backs through the whole affair, and even now, we're constrained in so many ways by what we can actually say and do.
What do you want to add to that, Elizabeth?
Yeah, well, I'm very much into the doctors, particularly in Australia. I think the doctors don't know anything about the conflicts of interest. There's so much they need to know because they just went along with this. And as you know, in Australia, Mike, it was just terrible because of the mandates. And so I've been making this continual argument that there is actually no informed consent here, no voluntary informed consent, because you can't give consent when you're being coerced. And the people who should have stood up on this are the doctors. And nurses are the people who are giving the injections, doctors and nurses. And I think when this story breaks, it's going to be huge because they are the ones who stuck the needle in the arm. So they are ultimately going to be accountable, and people are going to ask, why did you do this? Why weren't you asking questions? You were just basically doing what the government told you, but nothing overrules your own obligation to get voluntary informed consent. If you haven't got that, you've violated that the most important principle in medical ethics. You've touched somebody's body without authentic consent. So I think that is the huge story that is waiting to break. And the medical profession is going to be toast when people understand what's gone on.
Yeah, I agree. Elizabeth, just while we're here, you know about the UK conflicts. Is this happening with all drugs?
Well, I haven't explored all these areas, but it seems to be Pharma is running the show, or the shareholders of Pharma. Whoever's running this whole show, what that's going on. But there are definitely so many conflicts in Australia, and again, the public wouldn't know. There's the Australian Technical Advisory Group on Immunisation, which consists of various academics. And back in 2012. I wrote to Nicola Roxon, who was the health minister at the time, but trying to find out who these people are, just their names. And then in 2015, I wrote to then Prime Minister Tony Abbott to try and get more information about these people, their conflicts of interest. And we actually did get some disclosure then. We've had disclosure for a good few years, but during COVID, that information went AWOL. It was, these people were having this enormous, influence over policy in Australia, and we didn't really know what was going on, what they were doing, their conflicts of interest. And now I've been writing about that. I've persisted in writing about that, wanting transparency for their influence for years going back. And now what's happened is the Australian government has simply eradicated the information altogether. And they've got a new setup now where they're doing internal investigations of conflicts of interest just for their records, but the public can't access it. I just feel like we're under tyranny at the moment. We haven't got transparency. We haven't got accountability. It's the same in the UK. I mean, the UK is it's just terrible what's happening in these Five Eyes countries that we thought were free countries. The way we are being closed down, the way this is creeping on more and more, that we are losing our freedom, and there's no accountability from these people. And I think we've got to start going after the people at the bottom of this house of cards, people like the doctors, to go after the doctors and nurses and bring them to account for the fact that they didn't get consent. If we bring that out into the open, this has got ramifications all over the place. And for the regulator, it's got ramifications because they should have got authentic consent, and they didn't do it because they were under threat from their own regulator. That's APRA. In the UK, it's the GMC is the equivalent. And I'm sure Cheryl and David would know that the GMC was hammering practitioners who would speak out. So, and APRA was doing the same thing here. It's an appalling situation.
Cheryl, could you tell me about the testing of new mRNA cancer drugs in the UK?
It's there's lots and lots of mRNA cancer drugs in the pipeline, but they do seem to be coming up against brick walls once they start being tested. I know from a friend of mine that the number of people that are working in the biotech industry, in the genetic therapy industry, they are making people redundant at the moment. So it's not as straightforward as they hoped it would be, leading on from the mRNA vaccines for COVID. I think that they're very expensive because they've gone after very specific cancer treatments for a limited number of people, so their cost is very high. Chimera, which was one of the first ones that was released, that has a black box warning on it now because it can lead to secondary cancers. And we know from the turbo cancers and the mRNA COVID vaccines, that there is a link. So perhaps it's not going to be as straightforward a movement to mRNA cancer treatment, but they can't do what they're professing that they can do in terms of making these individual treatments for individuals without a great deal of harm to the people. And of course, if you pick cancer patients who have a chance of dying, which is a lot higher than the general population, then you can perhaps get away with this a little bit more easily.
David, what's the situation if you're looking at, because a friend of ours, Peter McCullough, he would always say vaccines are, you give it 7 to 9 years before you give it the big thumbs up, at least. With mRNA, they seem to have this let's go really fast attitude, don't they?
Well, I just come back on the point that Elizabeth said. I mean, I don't think it's. I just say that the doctors didn't do anything. We tried our best. I mean, I helped to set up Australians for Science and Freedom to try to counter the narrative. I mean, we've made numerous submissions to Parliament. We're not. There's a huge proportion of my profession that have tried really hard to do what we can, but we're citizens just like every other citizen, and we are not. We don't have the political leverage to the narrative other than doing the kind of things that we're doing. But coming back to the sorry, can you hear me okay? Yep.
All good.
All good. But coming back to the mRNA, well, look, I'll tell you what. One of the most striking things that happened in Australia was, Australians for Science and Freedom put a submission into the excess deaths in 2021, 2022, and we looked at the data at that time, and the Australian Bureau of Statistics had changed the way that they assessed the excess deaths, and they only looked at the 5 years preceding up to the actual year, in other words, 2022. Now, that can potentially lead to distortions in the figures. So I looked at the ABS statistics going back over 100 years, back to 1917, in fact, and I looked at the excess deaths in 2022 as a comparison. And at the time, my analysis was it was a 2 sigma event. In other words, 2 standard deviations above the average for the preceding 10 years. I did some corrections to make sure that the statistics were pretty reasonable. So a 2 sigma event is a 1 in 150 year event. But more recently, I've just gone back and revised that estimate using a new platform I've developed myself called deductive entropy. And in fact, 2022 in Australia was not a 2 sigma event, it was an 8 sigma event. An 8 sigma event. And what that says is that an 8 sigma event occurs once every quadrillion years. So it's an extreme event, an absolutely extreme event. And what it means is that there was a phase change in 2022, that something different happened in 2022 that was out of the normal regulatory processes. Now, the ABS isn't geared in the way it collects the data to be able to necessarily pick up these kind of signals, and so their treatment of 2022 was that it was yes, there was some excess deaths, but it was nothing out of the ordinary. I mean, what we can say is that the excess deaths of 2022 alone were more than the excess deaths of the entire Second World War. It was a huge event. And there's a lesson to be learned from that. The lesson to be learned from that is that something significant has happened to the health of Australia. For the first time in a long time, mortality rates life expectancy is falling in the USA, and it's plateaued in Australia. And there should be some attention paid to the fact that that this is a fundamental change in a trend of extended life expectancy, which has been going on for well over a century. And at the moment, coming back to what doctors can do, well, we don't we're not at liberty to question the government on these matters. I mean, many of my colleagues have put in FOI requests. We've put in challenges. We've put our own statements into the Senate inquiry into excess debts. We're very active at trying to do that, but all our efforts are falling on deaf ears. And the reality is, I think the real issue here is the immunity that drug companies have been granted in terms of their vaccination products. Whatever the issue is, the individual is entitled to rights of natural justice. And so, like any other product, if a person has been injured by that product, they should have a right to take their concerns to court in the normal judicial way. And it's the immunity, and then this issue will be settled once and for all. But it's the immunity that the drug companies have been afforded that is really creating a false dynamic in terms of the way in which these medications are being rolled out.
Elizabeth, what do you think?
Well, I understand what you're saying, David, about the doctors, but it has to be recognised the doctors have been suppressed. And what I'm dealing with is organisations like the Royal Australian College of General Practitioners, the Royal Australian College of Physicians, the AMA, and AHPRA. And throughout 2021, I wrote to them, all of them, and I begged them to take account of informed consent. The colleges and the AMA are the absolute pits. They've got no idea about informed consent. They treat the public with contempt. With AHPRA, I finally got a letter out of them in September 21, which confirmed that practitioners have to get voluntary informed consent. That was September 21. That was when mandates were being put in place. And in Victoria, the vaccinated economy by Dan Andrews. Now, National Cabinet was putting in place a national plan to open up. And the price that people had to pay was to get vaccinated. There was a nudge unit in the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet, behavioural economics team, BETA, and apparently it was their plan that you would have to get vaccinated for your freedom, and unvaccinated people would be restricted. This is what happened in a supposed free country, and the medical profession is so cowed they were unable to speak out about this. That is the most astonishing thing, that the medical profession went along with this, because they were captured by AHPRA and the position statement that was put out in March 21 that basically threatened them: get vaccinated, get everybody else vaccinated, and don't question anything. And they were being pushed to comply with government policies. I made you would know what a notification is. I made a notification to AHPRA about the Chief Medical Officer, Paul Kelly, at the time. I laid it all out, what he had done, because he was supporting mandatory vaccination, and he's a medical practitioner. He should know that you can't have compulsory vaccination. They just brushed off that notification because, it's policy. So when it suits them, we can't deal with that because it's policy. But at the same time, they were going along with government policy to make those practitioners comply. This is an enormous scandal that is waiting to come out, because these practitioners, according to the government, 75 million doses have been administered. And I say there is not informed consent for one dose because of the climate, of the hostile climate. Nobody could be properly informed because people will be told a tissue of lies about this risk of COVID. Children were being vaccinated. The fact that the practitioners didn't even have the guts to speak out about children being vaccinated, it's the most appalling situation, and it's got to come out.
Anybody? David, would you like to pop in? Or Cheryl, would you like to say something?
Yeah, I think that the actual leaflet that they got with these vaccines was blank. There was no information that they could give to people, and that should have just rung alarm bells. I could have gone and given people, administered the vaccines. They were shouting out in the UK for people to go and volunteer because everybody had to get it, so they needed lots of people to put needles in arms. there weren't any training. It was the first time that we'd had a multi-dose vial, which meant that you had to mix it from it being a frozen powder, and you had to mix it with saline, and then it was very sensitive to vibration. You had to turn it very, very slowly, but my turning 10 times slowly is different from your turning 10 times slowly. Nobody was trained on how to mix it and what have you. And then it was given to people by unqualified people like myself. I could have gone and done it. I could have volunteered, and I thought that was very, very good. People just went along with this because they'd put this fear into everybody, but doctors and nurses going along with it as well. When they knew what the system should have been like, they knew that they should have been able to read about at least what the contents of these files were. They didn't have that information, but they were still prepared to do it. And that goes against do no harm, because they didn't know what harm they were doing. That's right.
So what you're saying is that doctors should have known. Is that right, Cheryl?
Yeah, the process completely changed. It was a completely different process. You know, we were having people put their arm out through the window of a car in a car park to be injected. No swabbing or anything, just straight in with the needle. It was the most ridiculous time. And because of how I had, the training that I do within the industry, I knew the whole thing was wrong. It didn't fit with any way that we'd done anything before. And to manufacture these things within a short space of time was absolutely ridiculous. And of course, you know, you talk to Headley, he will tell you every step of the way, from it being frozen to it being liquid added, each time safety checks should be done, because it's a different product.
As my doctor, and a mighty fine one, could or should have doctors done more?
Yeah, you know, we were in the same situation as every other citizen. You know, I mean, I think you've got to differentiate here between public organizations. APRA is a bureaucratic organization. Even to a large extent, the RACGP and the AMA are closely linked to government organizations. In Australia, we established the Australian Medical Protection Society. I did a series of informative videos to try to help people navigate this space and explain these things to people. You know, as I say, I helped to set up Australians for Science and Freedom. And I know many of my colleagues did what they could, even at the threat of suspension and so forth. We just didn't have a platform to be able to compete with a massive global propaganda machine that was way out of anything any one of us have experienced before. You know, and I think it's really important to distinguish between public health, which is basically government controlled, government regulated, and so forth, and clinicians who are doctors like myself on the front line, who are working in, you know, not part of the bureaucracy, not part of the establishment, and we're just trying to do the best things we can for our patients and give them the best information we can. And I'm sure you would agree, Mike. I don't think we ever mentioned you ever getting an mRNA vaccine during that period. So because we didn't, and unless it was something specifically you wanted, then I wouldn't. You know, it comes down to patient-centered consultations. What the patient wants, trying to inform them as best as I can based on the available science. So I think the majority of my colleagues were caught up in the bureaucracy of this, just like every other citizen on the planet. Many of my colleagues received immunizations they didn't want. I mean, even Asim Al-Hatra, his father, had a vaccine which, according to Asim, accelerated his death through cardiovascular events. So we were all very much put in the same position as every other citizen on the planet. And it comes down to the leadership, it comes down to government, and it's poor government, systematically poor government, decade after decade, that has led us to this point now. The primary goal of government is to protect its citizens, the welfare of its citizens, to defend its sovereignty, and on so many fronts. And I mean, people may criticize me for this, but the situation in Bondi it was an example where government were complacent, where they had the opportunity to protect our citizens and take steps at an earlier stage, but were deaf to the concerns and the warnings that people voiced. And the same thing happens. How many times can you go to a Senate inquiry? You bring all these things up, you point out the data, you say these things to the senators. The last time I went to a Senate inquiry, not one senator turned up in the Senate building. All of them were on Zoom sessions, and 3 of them were in their kitchens with their children's pictures behind. When you've got government authorities like this, when you've got that kind of that kind of lack of concern or responsibility at governmental level, and a bureaucracy that is just unquestioning and suppressive, then any individual in that system is in the same situation. We can only do what we can to articulate a change. And I know many of my colleagues did. Many of the people try to create an open discussion on this. And we had to work with data which was flimsy, limited, because basically the data wasn't being made available to doctors. I mean, how crazy is that? John Ioannidis, who's one of the leading medical authorities in the world, the most cited doctor in history, said that the pandemic response was equivalent to a cat jumping off a cliff at the sight of an elephant. He was one of the most respected clinicians in the world. Who listened to him? Nobody. Jay Bhattacharya, who is now gladly the head of the NIH over in the United States, one of the prime major campaigners. I mean, he had death threats. His children were threatened. We got to understand this that doctors went through the same kind of suppression, the same kind of hostility from bureaucrats and from governments as every other sector of the community. What happened during the COVID years was an abomination, and we're all living with that now. And 2022, an 8 Sigma event, that is horrific. That is a horrific stain on the events that happened during that period. And what's required now is an investigation as to why was that an 8 Sigma event. I'm not saying it was anything. I think the right way to go here is to approach this with an open book, no prejudices, no biases, and explore why that was an 8 Sigma event. But of course, I'm as paralyzed or as constrained as everyone else in terms of asking these questions, and so too are many of my colleagues.
Yeah, I'm just Cheryl. And I want to come back to that in a second, David. But I just noticed that the UK encouraging people to wear masks. That would have to be one of the most ridiculous things I've ever heard of in my life, because after being proved that the masks don't work, and government saying, well, they don't really work, you're not meant to work anyway, and if you wear it, it's stopped you from passing it, not you from getting it, which all that sort of stuff. I see that they've, a couple of years down the track, they're back out there now promoting the mask, which other governments and other medical authorities around the world, if they haven't followed already, they will. So the question is, Cheryl, the chance of a repeat of what happened is very strong, because the number of people wearing those masks is growing in numbers, and yet all the evidence that has been provided since then shows you, one, they don't work, two, the vaccines aren't a vaccine at all, it's just gene therapy, short-term gene therapy, and so forth, goes on and on and on. But they're repeating, it's like, first time, okay, now here's another training drill, everyone put on your mask. Can you see government, say in the UK, for example, can you see government again, under the auspice of the WHO, deciding in the very near future, let's have another pandemic. Come on down, put the mask on, bend over, we'll give you one. In the bottom cheek, of course, with that injection. I mean, can you see that happening?
Yeah, I mean, they're trying because they're panicking people about flu. COVID came in, flu disappeared. Now flu's coming back. At the end of the day, it's not as bad a flu epidemic as they're trying to tell us, but that's what they're saying in terms of masks. So hospitals, apparently, some hospitals are making sure that you wear a mask when you go in there. And that's the problem people have got, because if you're going in for treatment, what do if they won't treat you, if you haven't got your mask on to go in to see a doctor? So they're trying to, but a lot of people have reacted against that and will not do it. But of course, some people never stop wearing masks. You see them around the supermarkets, people wander around, they're still wearing masks. And you feel like pulling them over and saying, you do realise you're doing yourself more harm than good actually wearing that. Keep breathing in your old CO2. Yes, they're trying to start us thinking about going for your flu vaccine. And of course, flu vaccines are in negative efficacy, so that's going to, if you have it, cause more flu than if you haven't had it. So it's building up this picture again, but I think a lot more people are awake. There were actually quite a lot of people in this country, a lot more than was told, that didn't actually have the COVID vaccines. So there was quite a few who have woken up. There's quite a few who saw people die and people have bad reactions to the vaccines. They're still living with that now, and therefore it puts people off having vaccines.
And somebody just wrote in, if the system is bad, then unsafe new drugs still going out. We don't need the pandemic. We just keep pushing these unsafe, these poorly tested, if not at all, drugs are going out. And we find the population, which you would have to agree, Elizabeth, that how can you thump someone on the head so many times to say this is not good for you, this is not safe, the masks don't work, the vaccines don't work, the trust in the medical profession, as in providing drugs, and I do understand and take David's point too that doctors were also under enormous pressure. But how
Can I mention something there, Mike? Can I mention something? I want to respond to David on that. You're in Queensland?
Yes.
Is that where you are, David? In Queensland?
Yes.
I just want to remind you, I don't know if you know about this, in November 21, Chris Perry, who was the president of the Queensland AMA, he went on national television on the Today programme and threatened people to get the vaccine. I've got this actually up in front of me at the moment. This is a doctor. He's a neck and head and neck doctor. He's not an expert in vaccines. He was just the president of the AMA. Didn't have a clue about vaccines. He's on television saying, if you're not vaccinated, it's going to be very, very hard to maintain a job, to be able to go anywhere. Life will be miserable without being vaccinated. You won't be able to hide. It's going to be very hard to maintain your employment if you're not vaccinated. You won't be able to go anywhere for entertainment. You're going to have a very, very lonely life, and you're not going to be able to maintain your employment. The livelihood is on the line. And he was also threatening the doctors. You won't be able to get a doctor to sign off that you got an exclusion, because there's quite set rules on that. And doctors will be ordered to see every one of their exclusions will be looked at very carefully. They'll get fined. They can get struck off. And he was saying patients who tell lies can be charged with fraud. And people having weddings are going to have to weed out the unvaccinated. The pubs and clubs are going to have to find out whether people are vaccinated before they allow them in. Otherwise, their businesses will go bankrupt. This is a doctor. He hasn't got the faintest clue about informed consent. He was threatening people, pressuring, coercing, manipulating people to comply. That guy is the living end, And this is what he was threatening people on national television, November 21. Think about how compelling that was then when mandates were in place. He should have been on the television warning people or warning the doctors not to comply with mandates. That's what he should have been doing. Instead of he was doing the very opposite in frightening people. It's deplorable. And if you don't know about him, you should be looking into him, because he has brought the profession into disrepute. He's violated the code of conduct and the immunisation handbook and other guidelines that were coming out about informed consent from the government at the time. And yet he's walking around free while other doctors who were trying to do the right thing were being suspended. When's this going to flip and be exposed?
David, would you like to reply, because the data towards you?
Those sort of words were almost verbatim what Dan Andrews was saying, and what Jacinta Ardern in New Zealand was saying, almost word for word. It was obviously a global script. You didn't have to be Queensland. It could have that statement could have been read out just about by anyone, anywhere all over the world. That's what all these people in power were basically reading from the same hymn sheet. And yes, there will be doctors who will take that kind of stance, just as there will be all people from all professions that will take that kind of stance, and they're part of the bureaucracy. But there's thousands of doctors who have. I mean, in reality, the people who are going to exert most pressure to get this moving forward into a more realistic scientific approach are going to be scientists, doctors, people who actually know what they're doing, people who are actually who have been in this profession for many years. These are the people who are our best hope of actually stringing together a coherent scientific approach to change these things, and put pressure on to create political change, because these are political decisions, these are political statements, and these are coming from a global narrative that was pervasive, and what they look for people in positions of power to go along and try and follow those patterns. I mean, in Australia, actually, we had John Gerard, who was the Chief Health Officer. He took over from, I forget her name now. Her husband, I know, was working for one of the drug companies involved in vaccinations. And John Gerard, in fairness to him, he took a number of steps to try to curtail the hubris that was going on at that particular time. And at one point, he got attacked by an organization trying to say that that 30% of the population would suffer from long COVID. Basically, this was an overseas organization hoping to make money out of this. He had personal attacks against him, even though his work was based in science, and he held his ground. So there's going to be people from all walks of life who you can look back and say they weren't they weren't counted for what they did. But look at Jay Bhattacharya. He's a doctor. Look at Martin Calder. Look at what I could in Australia and set up Australians for Science and Freedom. There were people to stereotype people and say that people were this or they were that. It doesn't break along clean lines like that. The reality was this was a political maneuver instigated against the whole world, and there were people who were part of the maneuver who were influenced by who knows what behind the scenes, and there were people, the rest, a large majority of us, that were either forced into compliance or suppressed for their views. And it wasn't.
Doctors and nurses injected people. They're not as they're a different group of people altogether. They actually injected people. This has got to be looked at. They did it. They did not get consent. They did not get informed consent.
Well, you have to look at the individuals. I mean, I personally didn't vaccinate anyone during that period. People came to me and asked to be vaccinated. I discussed it with them, and at the end of the day, some of them went for vaccinations and some didn't. We had open discussions about this. I tried to inform them as best I could. I've done numerous studies on this. Like I said, I analysed the data I went back 100 years through the ABS statistics to try to understand exactly what the mortality rates were during 2022, so we could put it into some context. At the end of the day, some people, regardless of what we can say in retrospect, some people honestly believe what they believed, and they came to doctors.
There were mandates in place. There were mandates in place.
There were mandates in place. Not a single
should have said we can't do this under mandates. That's what they should have said. They should have just said we will not be able to operate under mandates because we won't be getting voluntary informed consent. End of story. And they failed to do that. I don't think Cheryl realised how bad it was in Australia. It was really bad here.
Jay Bhattacharya came to Australia. He came to Australia to advocate against the mandates. We had a large movement that tried to advocate against the mandates. We don't create the laws. The doctors don't create the laws. Those laws came from governments. The mandates came from governments. And
doesn't matter if they came from governments. They shouldn't have done it. In England,
and the
NHS in England,
doctors got paid.
Elizabeth, you shouldn't have done what? Shouldn't have vaccinated patients.
There's lots of doctors in the UK.
Shouldn't have done what? They shouldn't have, regardless of the mandates, they shouldn't have done what?
They should have not complied with mandates. They put the needle in the arm. In England, the NHS, when they were going to make vaccination compulsory for the NHS, there were enough people in the NHS to say, we're walking if you do that. In Australia, it was terrible here in Australia. The doctors and nurses should simply have said, we will not be able to carry out vaccination if there are mandates in place because we know people are being coerced to comply. So we won't be able to do this ethically because we know people are coming in because they're being threatened they're going to lose their job or they're being threatened they won't be able to participate in society. I mean, I don't understand what is wrong with doctors? They don't understand ethics. Do you get taught about informed consent at all when you're at medical school? It's bewildering to me that they don't understand ethics.
All doctors needed to act together. That's the thing. It's
they didn't. They were too scared.
And this was a lot of people, a lot of doctors got paid for doing the injections, and that was a coercive factor for them as well.
Firstly, I mean, in Australia we set up AMS, Australian Medical Protection Society, as an alternative to the AMA because for this very reason that there were a lot of conscientious doctors trying to change the landscape. Secondly, we set up Australian Society for Freedom, where basically we try to act as a mouthpiece, an ethical mouthpiece to try to disseminate honest, scientifically validated information to the community. Many patients, many of the patients that went to doctors for vaccinations, they were driven by the propaganda machine. They were driven out of fear because they genuinely believed in the fear that was being percolated then at those times by the mass media. And they were going to doctors asking for vaccinations. I'm not saying that's the whole picture, but it was a large proportion of people actually going to doctors, wanting the vaccination, insisting on being vaccinated, and wanting to, and I did my very best to give the best scientific information that was available at that time, and I didn't force anybody into vaccinations. I let them make their own decisions. And I think
how many doctors do you think asked questions? How many doctors? They wouldn't have asked questions because AHPRA had threatened them not to ask questions. That position statement locked them down. It's a desire. AHPRA is at the heart of this, but also there's something wrong with the culture here that the doctors and nurses are so scared to question vaccination.
AHPRA is the regulator. AHPRA isn't a medical entity. AHPRA works for the government, or it works independently actually. And but it's a government regulatory organization. There's no doctor has any control over what AHPRA does or how they behave.
And they get suspended by AHPRA. I know that good doctors have been suspended by AHPRA, while doctors like Chris Perry are just wandering around after what he did, which was just despicable in dictating to the whole country to be injected It's the most astonishing thing what he did, and that it has got to be reviewed now in light of what happened in November 21, because so many people have been injected without voluntary informed consent.
What we have to do, we've run out of time. Sorry about that, guys. But we have run out of time, but I would like to invite you all back again, because I think this is a very, very important conversation. I think, and David, I think you're right.
Matt,
Yes,
can I just say that
you
we the people in England, we protested, and that's how we got the nurses to stop being fired if they didn't take the vaccination. It was we the people that did that. We went out on the streets on a regular basis, and we had petitions and everything. And
so did we, but it got no media coverage. It was all kept under wraps.
Yeah, we didn't. I mean, we didn't stop the care workers from being got rid of, and that left the sector in a big problem. But we managed to get the nurses from keeping their jobs.
We will do this again. I appreciate your time. We've had some audio issues at the moment. Johnny Dollar on chat said it was quite nostalgic. That with the noise in the background, it sounded like he was listening to old-fashioned radio or shortwave from when he was growing up as a boy 232 years ago. There you are, Johnny, and got you back. I've got to thank our panel, by the way, Cheryl Granger, Dr. David Richards, and Elizabeth Hart. I would like to continue. We have run out of time. I just want to wish you all the best for Christmas. Have a great Christmas. Enjoy yourselves. David, where are you off to tonight in your uniform, your Santa uniform?
No, quiet night in, mate. Quiet night in, just relaxing with a glass of wine.
And that's excellent. And good luck with the reindeer.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. But this is a very serious topic, and it was very vibrant, and I enjoyed it. I think I learnt a lot from it, but we need to continue again. So Jen will be with you in the very near future to lock in maybe another conversation and continue where we left off. Have a great weekend, everybody. Nice to have your company. This has been, it's been, as I find my thing, I've got to play out of this. There it is there. This has been The Protagonist. A little different this time, but talking about the evils of vaccines. I think, I don't know whether the world will ever come back from this. And personally, I don't think they will, actually. I think it was a surprise visit for many, many other things that are happening right now. And they will use that data of controlling the people to do exactly what they want. And if we think we've made any difference at all, except illuminate the problems of government and the following by the population like sheep over the edge of a cliff, you just have to look at what's happening now. Everything is turning to what would they say? Like to shit, and it is. Our liberties have gone. Everything is gone, and it's going to get worse, and it will never get better. We are not coming back from COVID, and it was just, in my opinion, it was the launch pad or the testing ground for what is about to happen and what has been happening to the world itself. Thank you very much. There's a nice cheery thought. Go home and have a whiskey. David, don't you dare. Thank you very much, Cheryl. Have a great weekend. Hopefully you can get above 3 degrees where you are. Here on the Gold Coast, it's going to be a lovely day tomorrow, about 28 degrees, and in Adelaide about the same too. So we're enjoying summer, Cheryl. Bad luck. Have a good one. This has been The World Today and The Protagonists. See you next Monday.